think we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adolfo Carrillo Cabello from the University of Minnesota. I'm happy to welcome you to the opening session of our fall 2022 series of the Language Collaboratory. The Language Collaboratory is a partnership for the advancement of intercollegiate dialogue on the teaching of languages and cultures, driven by the language centers and institutes at the University of Iowa, the University of Michigan, University of Minnesota, Michigan State University, and the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Our aim is to provide collaborative professional learning opportunities for educators of language, culture, and literature at the 5 institutions. The Language Collaboratory's fall session will focus on situating language programs and language learning and instruction in the rapidly changing world, a society responding to the needs and wants of spaces beyond the classroom. Specifically, our discussants will address elevating career readiness in the language curriculum, promoting service learning and other forms of community engagement, articulating the value of transferable skills and competencies gained during one's language learning journey, and other ways of preparing students for success after they graduate. You're invited to contribute to what we hope will be a lively discussion. The sessions will be recorded and made available through our YouTube channel for the Language Collaboratory. You are encouraged to subscribe to our channel where you can receive updates of when new content is available. When asked, we ask that you mute your microphone at the outset and that you use the tools in Zoom to contribute questions and comments in the chat. During the opening discussion period, please raise your hand virtually prior to activating your microphone. Closed captioning is available through the live transcript button in the Zoom menu bar at the bottom of your screen. Today, we will hear from Claire Francis, who is the director of the Center for Language and Culture Learning in the Division of World Languages, Literatures, and Cultures at the University of Iowa, and Dianna Murphy, who is the director of the Language Institute and co-director of the Russian Flagship Program at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. This session kicks off our fall session on the link below. You will, on the link between collegiate language study and postgraduate success. In this session, Claire Francis will discuss our vision for the series and frame some guiding questions, and Dianna Murphy will share research on undergraduate student perspectives on the link between language study and their career aspirations. Before we begin, we would like to encourage everyone to attend our next session, which will be held on Thursday, November 3rd at the same time. We will welcome Rebecca Pryor-Perret, who is Associate Vice Chancellor in Career Development at Washington University in St. Louis. We are inviting also your feedback by completing a short evaluation, and we will provide the link to the feedback form before the end of today's session. Please consider sharing your feedback and input with us, which would help us in our further planning. I will now pass it on to my colleague, Claire Francis, to start the session. Thank you.
Thanks, Adolfo. Welcome, everyone. It's nice to see so many familiar faces. I am going to get my screen shared and share with you the guiding questions for this collaboratory. As many of you know, our previous collaboratories have really focused on the student experience as a learner during their collegiate tenure, with presentations on accessibility, inclusivity, autonomy, engagement, and well-being, among others. And so this semester, we're really turning towards what happens to students after they leave us and how we can prepare them to be lifelong learners or to use their language skills out in the world. So these are some of our guiding questions. about forging connections between life and work skills in your teaching, how to equip students with global competencies, preparing students for career exploration and networks, and how to better prepare students to be flexible and adaptive to changes in the marketplace as we go forward, and how language programs can remain competitive in recruitment and retention. We are looking forward, as Adolfo said, to talking about these questions with you and with our speakers throughout the semester. Rebecca Paré, as he noted, Prior Paré, will be talking to us about marketable language competencies in a month. And other topics include, but are not limited to, things like credentialing with the Global Seal of Biliteracy, more on recruitment and retention, or community engaged learning. The topic for this series, for what we're doing this semester, is of course informed by student and parent anxieties about career readiness in an increasingly tight job market. I am the mother of 3 20-somethings myself, and I'll just speak from experience, one of whom is a French major, just graduated. And, you know, you worry about your kids in this age range about whether they're going to use the skills that they've learned in college and take them out with them into the world, and whether they know how to, unpack the skills that they've developed over the years. We want to connect the dots for them, and also for administrators, I think, as so many of our colleagues before us throughout the years, since I was a French major in the 1980s, about how language study is a value-added proposition, about how it's going to create open doorway or open pathways to them in the future, in their futures. But at the same time, we want to maintain a balance over the course of our conversations this semester, and about in not being overly instrumentalist and not seeing foreign language study as a priori a means to a career, because postgraduate success is also about lifelong learning and engaging in the joyful experience of growing linguistic, cultural, and intercultural competencies. So today, a little bit of a program switch from what Adolfo said is that Dianna will speak first about research on undergraduate student perspectives on the link between language study and career aspirations. And then afterward, I'm going to talk about a 2017 study by Rebecca Damari and Bill Rivers about multilinguals in the US labor market. And then after that, we hope to have everyone participating in this conversation. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dianna to talk to us about the survey that Wisconsin did with students.
Thanks so much, Claire. Hi, everyone. Okay, I'm going to cruise through some findings from a survey that we did at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in the fall 2019. So keep in mind that data from the study are a couple of years old already and were collected pre-pandemic. I called this the career connection, conditions that would make undergraduate students more likely to study languages other than English. Oh, whoops, and I'm not on presenter view. Now I am. Okay. So this study was based on a census survey that we conducted at UW-Madison, meaning that it was a survey of the full undergraduate population, not just of students enrolled in language courses, but of all undergraduate students at the university. It was based on an online questionnaire comprised of close to 100 items that we developed with UW Survey Center that asked students to respond to questions about how highly they value proficiency in languages other than English in terms of their personal interests, their majors, and relevant for today's conversation, their career aspirations. We also asked why they're not studying languages, why they are studying languages if they were, and conditions that would make them more likely to undertake or continue language study in the future. The response rate was about 11%, and so our sample size was close to 3,300, about half of which was were students who had never taken a language course with us, and half of which had taken one or more courses in one or more of 42 different languages. Michigan State University did a partial replication study based on this same survey, and the findings from the UW-Madison survey will be published shortly. in the fall 2022 issue of Second Language Research and Practice. So the findings that I'm sharing with you today will be available in that publication. So I'll be sharing, just touching on a couple of relevant findings related to two research questions. The first of which is how highly students, undergraduate students, value proficiency in languages other than English, and conditions that would make them more likely to enroll in our courses in the future. So first of all, related to how highly students at least say they value proficiency in languages other than English, on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is not at all important and 5 is extremely important. In terms of their personal interests, you can see here, we have a mean of 3.51, which is that overall, altogether in aggregate, proficiency in languages other than English was between somewhat to very important for the students on our campus. In terms of their career plans, though, it was less important. So we can see here the mean 3.02 for all students together, that language proficiency was just a little bit over somewhat important to students. If we break that down, then this chart shows the distribution of response options of these three domains: career, the students' value of the reported value of proficiency in languages other than English to them in terms of their career plans, is represented by the blue bars here. And so you can see here that in terms of the career plans, languages are somewhat important to close to a third of the students, but very or extremely important to not so many students. A little bit over 63% of the students altogether said it was somewhat to extremely important to them in terms of their career plans. If we look at, and this slide has a ton of data on it, I would like to just draw your attention to the data that's highlighted in red, which is, we looked at student responses based on whether they had taken courses, language courses with us in the past, or if they were enrolled in language courses with us at the time that they completed the survey, and then minus LOTE means they'd never taken language courses with us. And so you can see here that for students who had never taken language courses with us, their interest in languages in terms of their career goals are between just a little to somewhat important. So less so to some of our students. Okay, so we asked students then, what would make you more likely to enroll in language courses at UW-Madison? And we gave students, it was over 20 different options that could indicate yes, no, this would make me more likely to study a language or not. And of all of those 20 plus different conditions, here's what rose to the top for both groups of students, both those students who had never taken a language course, that's the minus float column, and the plus float column. At the very top, ranked number 1 or 2, was that they would be more likely to take a language course if they heard from employers that they valued skills in languages other than English. And this is one of the things I think we need to discuss or consider. Do employers really value languages other than English? Claire will share some data that says that they do, but are students hearing that from prospective employers? And when it comes down to it, is it the language proficiency that's valued, or is it the other types of competencies that students are developing through their language study that are valued? At any rate, students would like to hear from employers that they value languages. Then really close to the top in terms of the relative ranking of these different factors or conditions that would make students more likely to study language is if students saw more direct links between their language study and their career plans. for many of our students, they just maybe don't see how if they're not hearing from employers that language study is valued, if they're not developing language proficiency to a degree that they feel like they can use it professionally, right, maybe they don't see those links. And then finally, a bit lower down in terms of the overall priority, students indicated that they'd be more likely to take language courses if they focused on topics that are of professional interest to them, and if they could do an internship in which they could use their language abilities. So again, just briefly, this was super short, but I do want to encourage you to check out the forthcoming second language research and practice issue in which this study will be published. And then we'll have another publication coming out soon. This was a study that many people participated in, so many thanks to all of my colleagues. And that's it. Back to you, Claire.
In depth, and the other one a little bit more at the outset of this fall series so that we can all be on the same page, so to speak. So Damari et al., they developed a language and culture model for Michigan State's annual recruitment trends, and they had fewer survey respondents than the University of Wisconsin-Madison, but they had about 2,100 businesses. So they distributed this through career centers who then distributed to businesses. And the responses from the survey represented small, medium, and large companies and organizations in a variety of sectors. And these were the goals of the study. I'm not going to read them out to you, but really they want to look at global competence. You can see my highlights, and how that is facilitated through language. And to kind of figure out whether employees are articulating a need for foreign language speakers in their hiring practices, in their corporate values or their company values, and then to look at what kinds of functions those companies use, what kinds of skills would be required, and how that impacts our majors. So they had 6 items. These are the survey questions and what they included. The items that the first category here about cross-cultural ability, for example, the question was, on a scale, as an employer, I value employees who can show they're able to work effectively with customers, clients, and businesses from a range of different countries and cultures. Item 2, does your organization have a recruitment strategy which identifies foreign language skills? So you can see that's bullet point number 2. 3, does your organization have a recruitment strategy which specifies different levels of foreign language competence? 4, does your organization have a recruitment strategy which records the candidate's capability in a first language other than English? 5, does your organization have a recruitment strategy which gives advantage to multilingual candidates? And finally, in your organization, do new hires need to speak another language other than English? So here are some of the results from this. As you can see, more than 93% of survey respondents indicated that they valued employees who could work effectively with an intercultural and international clientele. And here we can see about 66% reported that they identified foreign language skills in the hiring process. And then here we have about 41% that reported that their hiring strategy gave an advantage to multilingual candidates. 34% reported that they specified levels of foreign language competency, and 28% of respondents indicated that they recorded the candidates' capability in a first language other than English. I think I got those numbers right. Yeah, so those are blue, right? However, only 10% of the total of the professionals, of the human resource professionals who completed the survey indicated that they required new hires to speak at least one other language besides English. So the data clearly shows a discrepancy between respondents' expressed valuing of employees who possess cross-cultural ability and respondents' specific focus on language proficiency during recruitment and hiring. So the authors note that this number may be low due to real or perceived lack of job applicants possessing the required language abilities, and we can talk about that a little bit more, or it may be due to a failure of qualified candidates to understand the labor market or the relevance of their particular skills, particular language and intercultural skills. And so, and I think that's something that we can definitely talk about in terms of preparing our students for their careers. So in terms of recruitment by sector, these are the sectors that with the most need for foreign language, students with foreign language proficiencies. Obviously, government and public organizations were significantly more likely than those in other sectors to specify levels of foreign language competence and to record candidates' ability in their first language other than English. And as a side note, the authors also found that smaller organizations were more likely to require new hires to speak at least one other language besides English. But larger organizations reported some level of need for a language-enabled workforce, indicating that their companies gave an advantage to multilingual candidates. So these are the sectors, the patterns of recruitment strategies by sector, and these are the implications, I think, or the ramifications for the academic field of study. So obviously, certain academic fields of study were more likely to be sought in combination with foreign language skills than others, with unsurprisingly the highest level in the arts and the humanities and social sciences, in health services and social services. So the key takeaways is that from both this study and ACTFL's Making Language Our Business, is that there is a talent gap. There's a need for skilled professionals to meet this demand, not only as translators and interpreters, but also working in sales, marketing, customer service, product management, and vendors, right? And they expect that this need will grow. But the authors also note that there was a gap in employers' understanding of demand. So some sectors might demand more linguistic proficiency as well as intercultural competence. Let's say working in a human services sector might require that, whereas engineers working abroad in a country might require more cultural knowledge, but maybe not, they can get away with a lower level of linguistic proficiency. So there's a real need for the for the employers to do a needs analysis and to create real messaging and goals and outcomes around the kinds of skills that they're looking for their multilingual employees to do. There's also a suggestion that the employers should test and assess and have a repertoire or an inventory of the competencies and the linguistic, not only linguistic competencies, but how people can use their language in the workforce. And then to work with colleges and universities. And I think, again, this is where Dianna's survey and this survey kind of can communicate with each other, is how to bridge this, to bridge the gap between employers and colleges and universities in order to get the messaging out there to students as this is the kind of skills we're looking for in this sector, and also on our end to help students unpack those skills. And then articulating, again, as part of this, industry needs in order to design relevant programs. And so that was the demand side, right? The employers have a demand for foreign language skills. And on the supply side, or what we're working in, is what can we do? And the implications are clear, right? We need to have a rigorous and comprehensive study of the kinds of language capacities that are required in these sectors. We need to talk to our administrators and admissions people and advisors to help them understand the kinds of majors for whom language competency would be an asset. Develop more pragmatic language courses in order to prepare students for the future. And encourage and incentivize students in other majors to study language, try to work around those scheduling issues that we're always running into. And finally, it is critical to know what levels of proficiency our students are achieving. So I put, these are, obviously you can't click on this Zoom link here, but this is the article. This is again a 2017 study. And then the Making Languages Our Business is a 2018 study. So I think, of course, with the pandemic, the situation may have changed quite a bit. But I think the final thoughts and takeaway here is that the data indicates a kind of disconnect between the demand for the college students who possess these capabilities and the demand for them, and then the availability, right? So there's a demand, but they're not really clearly articulating exactly what types of skills they're looking for. And then education and businesses, educational organizations and businesses need to address the disconnect and recognize that sustained collaboration with business community can better prepare graduates who are seeking the employment. So in the years since the reports, we've seen some good news and some bad news. We have the scaling back of language requirements for one, or the wholesale scale shuttering of language programs and departments due to enrollment trends in higher ed and strapped budgets. But on the other hand, we have the growth of bilingual programming, I think, in the K-12 world in particular. And I think the growth of the Seal of Biliteracy and the Global Seal of Biliteracy are kind of trends in a good direction in terms of tracking where our students are at and how we're preparing them for the world. And now I just want to turn it over to everyone else and welcome the dialogue on these two surveys that we put together, or two pieces of information. It looks like we have some questions in the chat.
Yeah, and I'll jump in just very quickly, just to remind everyone that we'll be stopping the recording at 4. That doesn't mean that we end our conversation. We invite you to continue our informal discussion. It looks like we have time for thoughts from both of you on a question that Kate posted in the chat just to close our initial discussion in the recording. And the question reads, one of the things I hear from the humanist in language departments is that a focus on career commodifies language study. Do you have thoughts about how we can talk about this topic in a way that meets the students' career needs and also respects the humanistic nature of our work? Dianna, Claire, thoughts on this? Dianna.
Yeah, Kate, thank you so much for bringing that up. We discussed that quite a bit, actually, and even thinking about this as a focus for our conversations this semester, because I'm profoundly uncomfortable with a narrow instrumentalist approach to advocating for language study. And I think it does our colleagues, our programs a disservice to only focus on the practical career applications of what it is that we do. But at the same time, I think that being responsive to student and parent interest and understanding how their language study as part of their broader education in our colleges and universities prepares them for postgraduate life. So we sort of thought about this series as postgraduate success, which would mean in different types of careers, potentially, and in communities in their lives. And so I don't know if it's balancing in terms of our advocacy work and our recruitment strategies, balancing messaging that speaks to career development and preparation, in addition to the many other types of or ways that we want to frame language learning for our students. I'm really curious to hear what the rest of you think about this. I feel like it's such a tension.
Yeah, we'll welcome.
Can I add something about
Yes,
the humanistic inquiry? And I think that's a very important question. And I said at the outset, Dianna and I think we're both on the same page about not wanting to instrumentalize language study in this way, but also being very aware of the anxieties about the job market. And I think one of the topics that we're hoping to talk about is also community engaged, like humanities for the public good. And we are at the University of Iowa, for example, we're working on developing a humanities lab that will allow students to develop the kind of skills of humanistic inquiry that are also multilingual and community engaged, right? And so to also kind of see pathways through which we can use our humanities skills in a way that is also potentially career driven. I hope that answers a little bit.
Thank you, Claire. I'll stop the recording now, but we can continue